his grandparents. And anyone that was ever in Flatbush knows Flatbush is a regular, normal American Jewish community. Feels very much like Brooklyn Beach, to an extent, depending where you are. And going from there to Borough Park is an amazing experience. Anyone that has ever been in Borough Park, Flatbush to Borough Park, you're literally going into a different universe. Borough Park, it's pulsating with the Jewish feel. Chazal tells us that a sleep is a 60th of death. Like, Borough Park is the 60th of Mea Shearim. Like, it's very Jewish. It feels very geschmack to be there. You walk down the avenues, they're full of Jewish stores. Anything that you could dream of Jewish is there. But this time, when I was walking there, I saw something I never saw before. In Flatbush Borough Park in New York, it's very hard to park. So they have something called the smart car, which is basically a car that the length of the car is the width of a regular car, and it can park headfirst. Very small car. A lot of times used as patrol cars, maybe Hatzalah, Chaverim, the police. So I see one of these cars down the block in Borough Park. It looked like a Chaverim car, patrol, something, maybe Hatzalah. And as I get closer, I see on the side it says Shabbos guy. So it's very funny because I happen to have been learning Ben Azmanim. I was going through some of the halachas of Amir La'akim, of asking a guy to do a malacha on Shabbos. And the first thing that came to mind was, you have a Shabbos patrol car going around. Is there a, dummy's guide to Amir La'akim, to speaking to a guy in Shabbos in the car? It's one of the extremely complicated. It's in a bunch of different places in Shulchan Aruch. And after going through it, I'm so confused. But whatever, we have to know. When it went up that I was speaking about Amir La'akim, it was yesterday, a good couple of Talmidei Chacham came over to me and said, so you're going to say over the Yesod of Amir La'akim? What's the Yesod of Amir La'akim? Amir La'akim is Aser. That's what it means. It's not like, it means that it's Aser. Amir La'akim is, one is not allowed to say to a guy to do malacha on Shabbos for him. That is what it means. There are ifanim that you could do, there's ways to do beheter. But the concept starts as Aser. Like, you're not allowed to carry outside on Shabbos. That's the rule. If there's an area, you can carry. But the starting premise is that it's Aser. And then we can discuss how to get out of the issue. It's Kedai the whole shit just for that. It's Aser, and you have to really know the halachas in order to... So just to set up a couple basic things, and maybe say Asfara, but again, to get the whole sugya is it's Aveder Abba. The Chazal Aser Amir La'akim, there's 2 or maybe 3 basic reasons that I saw given over. Could be there's more, but the basic reasons that are quoted are: step 1 is that there's an issue, a concept of a shlichus. We know that you can make someone an agent to do a bunch of different things for you. Kedushin, for an example, we know about to give a get. Usually you can't have a goy be a shliach, but for this halacha l'chumra, Chazal said it could be a shlichus, and even though it's for an aveira. So there's a concept that the guy could be a shliach for you. When you tell a guy to do a malacha on Shabbos, he's your agent, and it's as if you did the malacha itself. That isser is even Erev Shabbos. You can't tell a guy on Erev Shabbos to do a malacha on Shabbos, because he's your agent on Shabbos. It's kilo you did the malacha. That isser is also an isser, nothing to do with Shabbos. You can't tell a guy to go cook milk and meat for you. You can't cook the milk and meat, you can't tell a guy to do it. So there's an all across the board isser of Amir La'akim, of telling a guy to do any isser in the Torah for you. The second thing that's discussed is davar davar. Davar davar is a halacha in Shabbos, that a person in Shabbos is not allowed to speak devarim, words of weekday, of malacha. For example, a person cannot tell his friend, please drive me to the airport Matzah Shabbos. Because on Shabbos he's discussing driving. Driving is a malacha. So if you tell a guy, this isser is only going to be on Shabbos itself. If you tell a guy, please turn on the light for me, you're discussing words of an isser. So there's an isser of davar davar. And these are very different. One, the isser of shlichus is the isser of the action of the malacha Shabbos is the issue. You have an agent, and it's kilo you did the action of the malacha through the concept of shlichus. The isser of davar davar is nothing to do with the actualization of the guy doing the ma'isa, of doing the action for you. It's you're speaking. The fact that you spoke out the words is the isser of davar davar, and that would only happen on Shabbos. If you told him Erev Shabbos, then there's no isser of davar davar. There is an isser of shlichus. It's a good point, but through shlichus, through shlichus, it's kilo you did it, it's kilo to malacha. So it's going to be asar davar davar, yeah. There's another thing given by the Ram, which I'm not going to get into. The Ram says that if you tell a guy to do things for you, you might end up coming to do it yourself. It's another reason not to tell a guy to do something. There are heterim, which I'm not going to discuss at all right now. There's a heter called shvus, the shvus l'tzerech mitzvah, different tzarachim. That means if you tell a guy to do it, it's a derabanan. Certain times it's mutter. Ask your LOR if that ever comes up. But that there's also ben hashmashis. There's certain heterim if someone forgot to light Shabbos, like ben hashmashis. You could tell a guy to do it, whatever the ben hashmashis period is. And other heterim, but that's not the point right now. In the actual Isser, there's two basic steps. There's the actual commanding the guy, like we said before, the commanding the guy is Asr, because of, let's discuss the shlichus aspect. He's doing it for you and you're speaking it if you say it on Shabbos, it's speaking the davar davar. There's also an Isser of deriving benefit from an action that a malacha that a guy did for you. Chazal were worried that if a guy would do an action for you of malacha and you would derive benefit from it, so you might come later to tell him to do it again and you can't have benefit. This is Asr even if you didn't tell him to do it. If you're sitting in a dark room and you can't read, and a guy comes in and the janitor comes in, sees you sitting there and turns on the light for you, you have to leave. You're not allowed to use the room. You can't derive benefit even without the Amir. Two completely different Isurim. And anytime you want to have a heter in the issue of Amir La'akim, we're going to have to get rid of these three issues. You have to make sure that there's no davar davar issue, that you're not speaking about malacha on Shabbos. You have to make sure that he's not your shliach, and you'd have to make sure you don't have anah. How do you get rid of the issue of anah? The basic two ways to get rid of the issue of anah is, first of all, if it's not real anah, if it's indirect. L'mashal, if the malacha was that he turned off the light. If you turned off the light, you're not deriving benefit directly from what he did, because he didn't give you something, he took away something. So if he took away, you're just in the vacuum of his action. So Mamela, you're not deriving direct benefit from what he did. That doesn't have an Isser of Anah. It would still have simply the Isser of telling him, so you have to get rid of that issue. But the Isser of Anah is taken care of. Or if, let's say, there was enough light that I could see, and he just makes it more bright, so then he's only being ma'aseh. He's not giving me, I really have that ability without him, that also not to be considered Anah.
Do you say like an AC, that you turn on the AC, is that considered ma'aseh?
Gotta ask the rabbi that question. Because you could deal with it. I don't know. I mean, simply, it's a whole new concept.
Right.
So that takes care of the Hana. Now, the biggest issue, which is really what I want to discuss and focus on tonight, is how to take care of the speaking. How do you get out of the speaking? So we all know, you have to hint. Because if you hint, you didn't say it. That's the basic thing we all know about. So you go to the guy and you hint. So it happens to be, as a side point, I was discussing the exact points of hinting. I was talking to Talmid Chacham about it. And he was very, very stark that 95% of the time, what happens is you start with a hint. And you say whatever you say that you think is a legitimate hint to have him do the malacha. And he comes in, and the way he said it was a very good point. The guy's petrified that you're going to sue him. He does the wrong thing. He feels awkward. He doesn't know what you want from him. And he starts asking you questions. And you feel really funny and uncomfortable because you shut the guy down the block. And 95% of the time, what ends up happening is either says, should I turn on the light? And you say, yes, which is usher, because that's not a hint. Or you just forget about the whole thing and you say it, which is not pasha. I'm not saying it's usher. There could be that there are people that say in certain situations that wouldn't be an issue, but it has to be dealt with. It's not pasha at all. You have to ask a shaila to get past that step to make sure that you're hinting, your misa doesn't all of a sudden shift into speaking out, which is a very practical thing that usually will happen to most people if you're not very careful. Any issue, it will be both. If you say yes, it's both. I don't know. It's for sure shlichus. That's true.
This is only on Shabbos, right? If you give the guy a warning before Shabbos and say, by the way, I might come during Shabbos to do certain things. I'm allowed to speak it out for you.
If you tell a guy to do something on Erev Shabbos, to do a malach on Erev Shabbos, it's also because of shlichus. So the question is again, so how do we take care of a mizah? So where do we find the concept that hinting works? Who said hinting works? So the Makar is there, it's a Mefurish Gemara. Now the Gemara has nothing to do with Amir La'akim. The Gemara is talking about a case where you want to hire a Yid to do work for you, Matzah Shabbos. So you're not telling him to do a malacha, you're telling him to come to you to work Matzah Shabbos, after Shabbos. That's only an issue of davar davar. You can't speak business speech on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, the translation, I got this translation at ArtScroll, the ArtScroll translation of what the Gemara says, the hint. The Gemara says you could say, shall we see whether you will join me this evening? if you could say that to the plumber, so everyone knows why you're telling the plumber, shall we see if you'll join me this evening, is because you have an issue that he has to help you with. But I didn't tell him to do a malacha. Well, if plumbing is a malacha. Let's discuss a case of malacha, a mechanic, whatever, he's fixing your car, whatever the issue is going to be. And you say, shall we see if you're going to be with me, if you'll join me this evening? That is, it's a hint. So I didn't do dabar davar. So that is, the Gemara says that the pasuk that we learned, dabar davar, they're not allowed to speech of malacha on Shabbos. We dashin dibur is asar, but here thought is mutter. So anything that doesn't qualify to be a legitimate speech, dibur of malacha, if it didn't pass the parameter of straight black and white speech about malacha, it's still in the category of here. The speech that I used is not about the malacha. Whatever is implied and understood about the malacha is all within the thought process of the two people. It's never spoken out. So that doesn't have the issue of davar davar. But that's very nice. It takes care of issue 1 of davar davar. But it doesn't take care of the shlichus issue. So because of this, the Ramah passes la halacha that every time you hint, you have to hint. The words are shaloi b'derech tzivud. There's 2 types of hints, 2 categories of hints. There's a hint b'derech tzivud, that means a commanding type hint. If there's a commanding type hint, even though it's a hint, so I never spoke out the malacha, so I wasn't ebed davar davar, because there was a command connoted in my hint, so it does make the connection of shlichus, and the guy is my agent, so mamela there's a shlichus issue. So I would have to hint something without the command. Now, just as an example, what does this mean? A command or not a command? So one of the cases given in Shulchan Aruch of a command type of hint is, in the olden days, I don't know if I always used to watch this by Neres Chanukah. After a while, like there's a mushroom that forms on top of the wick, and then the fire starts dancing around it and it starts dimming it. So in the olden days, if that would happen, it would be hard to read. So they would knock off the mushroom and the wick would go straight again, and it would shine nicely. So to do such a thing on Shabbos is a malacha. So the hint that was given in the Gemara is that basically you tell the guy, please wipe the nose, which was understood to mean, like in the olden days, that means to take care of the mushroom on the ner. Now that you commanded him to do it. So there's a command over here. So if there's a command, that would be asr. A case which would not be a command, the case that's given in Shulchan Aruch, is if I tell the guy, why did you not do that for me? Why did you not turn on the light for me? I'm not commanding him to turn on the light for me. I'm expressing that I was upset that he didn't turn on the light for me 5 hours ago. Now he will understand the next time we hit that situation, next Shabbos, that he should turn on the light. I didn't command him to do it. He inferred that from the situation without a command. That would be a hint, and that would be mutter. So now, in order to get rid of every issue, what you'd have to do is you have to do a command. I'm sorry, you have to do a hint. That's not a commanding hint. And that non-commanding hint has to be in a situation where I'm not having benefit, which would be either that I already had the light on a little bit and he's just adding light, or an indirect benefit, which is turning off the light or something like that. So in order to qualify, to do Amir al-Akim, bottom line, without the special term, it has to be a hint that has no command, which I'm not going to go, you have to define exactly what that means, how to get a hint without a command, and that you're not having the issue of ana. And then you took care of all 3 issues. You have no ana, you have no speaking of malacha because you have a remiza, it's a hint, so there's no davar davar, and because there's no, it's not a tzivur, it's not a command, there's no shlichus. Takes care of all 3. Now, the big issue in the sugya is that this is all the Ramah, Shittas Ramah. There is a Bach and a Taz that both paskin, we don't go this way la halacha, but they both paskin, the Bach and the Taz, that a person could do a remiza, could do a hint as a command. And the Bach says, I'll bring you a raya. What's the raya? Because the Gemara we discussed before, the Gemara says that a person could go to a worker, a Jewish worker, and say, shall we see if you'll join me this evening? Which is a hint. So I see that when you hint, it's mutter. So Zak Bach, so if I hint to a guy to do malacha for me on Shabbos, it's also mutter. And the question is obvious. The case of the Gemara has nothing to do with Amir al-Akim. It's nothing to do with Amir al-Akim. It's a davar davar, an issue of speaking out of malacha. And over there, when you hint, we have the Gemara that says, Dibur is asr, speech is asr. Here, thought is mutter. And as long as they don't have a qualifying speech, it's still within the parameter of here, of thought. So I never cross the border, and it's davar davar, it's mutter. But how did he take care of the issue of shlichus? That's the big question. There's a command here. Very nice as a hint, but there's a command. He's my shliach, why should it be mutter? So, to answer this is B'derech Efsher, we could say, that we have to break down really every single action that a person does.
What's the command in that case?
What? Shall we see? There's no command. It's not an issue of Amir La'akum.
Right.
That's only Dabar Davar. You're telling him to do malacha after Shabbos.
There's no malacha either. Right.
There is a malacha. You're telling him to do. You're telling him to be a poil. You're coming to be seichem as a poil. That's the thing. You're speaking on Shabbos to hire him after Shabbos. Right. That's the question on the back. That very nice. What?
There's no malacha mentioned. There's no davar davar.
That's the Gemara is bringing a raya. The Gemara is bringing a raya that by the Isser of Dabar Davar, you're not allowed to be seichem as a poil on Shabbos. It's Dabar Davar. But I could tell him that come to me Matzah Shabbos, I'll be seichem you because that's here. That's not Dibur. So that's a raya that Remiza. If I didn't actually be seichem you, I hinted that I will be seichem you. That Remiza is mutter. So that is the question on the back. That takes care of the Dabar Davar issue. But you have no raya to take care of a different case, of a case where there's a Remiza b'derech tzivoy that simply would have a second issue of shlichus. There's no raya that's going to be mutter. So in every single case of anything, we always have, let's say, every case of mitzvahs or averis. There's two categories. There's a mitzvahs shebegufay, means bodily mitzvahs that the mitzvah doesn't. It's not an action-based mitzvah. Let's say sitting in a sukkah is not the mitzvah. Is not the walking into the sukkah. It's not the action. It's the fact that you're within a sukkah, putting on tefillin, which is nothing. It's not the action of tying the tefillin. It's being within the situation of having tefillin. It's not an active mitzvah. It's just the fact that you're there. It's with your body. And then there's action-based mitzvahs. Let's say being mafresh truma, taking off truma from something that's chayav truma, or let's say there's a mitzvah to shech the karban pesach. Those are action-based mitzvahs. And we know the Gemara Kedushin says that action-based mitzvahs, you could have the concept of shlichus. Because the mitzvah has nothing to do with me per se. It's the fact that if you want to say, if I caused it, I did it, I have the action. In that type of mitzvah, there's Allah of shlichus. You could do it for me. I have it done. The action is done through you for me. So I have you did the action for me. I have that action. But if the mitzvah is a body mitzvah, sitting in the sukkah, so the mitzvah is not the action. So you can't do that for me. I have to be in the sukkah. If I make you my shliach to sit in the sukkah, it doesn't help because I wasn't sitting in the sukkah. So anytime we have a case of a mitzvah shebegufa, it's not going to work. Shliach is not going to work. You always have to have a maisa, an action-based type of thing to have shlichus. When it comes to Shabbos, malacha of Shabbos, is the malacha of Shabbos an action-based malacha, action-based isser, or is malacha of Shabbos a body-based isser? So simply, without the simple understanding of how there's an action. The action is you can't do malacha, you can't turn on a light, you can't drive a car, you can't do the action, make a fire. But there is a mashmois and a beis meir, plead the gezach. The beis meir sounds like, and if anyone remembers, Rabbi Shnaidman came, he said a shir here from Chaim Kanievsky. He said over this similar type of yisai to differentiate between Shvius, Shemitah, and Shabbos. That Shabbos is actually, one could look at it in a certain light, that it's a body-based mitzvah. Why? The issue of lighting the fire is not the action of lighting the fire. The action of lighting a fire is a wherewithal making you in a situation that you're not resting. Shabbos is a day of rest. We have to be b'shvis, so we have to rest. When we're involved in the malacha, the issue is not the action of doing the malacha. That's just a hichatimsa, a wherewithal that creates that I'm not in a situation of resting. And the issue is the fact that I'm not in resting. For that, you can't have a shlichus. A shlichus can't be on the fact that I didn't rest, because that's not an action. That's a body issue. So I can never make a shliach. It's never an issue. But what does it mean when the Rishonim say that the Isser of Amir La'akim is shlichus? How do you have a shlichus by Amir La'akim? Shlichus means that the guy was my agent to do the action of lighting the fire. You can't have shlichus when it comes to Malach of Shabbos, because it's a body-based thing. It's not a mice. It's davar shebeguf. So how b'chlal could you have the concept of shlichus? So maybe in a half a minute, we could say it was mentioned a couple of years ago. I don't know if I'm assuming no one remembers, but in the actual issue of davar davar, you could break it down into two different ways to look at it. Is the issue of davar davar dibur, the fact that I spoke about Shabbos, is the issue that I expressed to you. You said of dibur, whenever I speak, it's to express to you my thoughts, to forward to you what I'm thinking. Is the issue that I told you something, and I'm expressing to you that I have it within me the desire to have malacha? Or is it something else? When I speak, I made, if you want to say very broken down, there's sound waves that I created. I created a concept through my dibur. I created a chol, a mundane words. And these mundane words that I created in Shabbos, these actual words that were created in Shabbos are an issue. I can't create those words in Shabbos. If you say the second way, you could take it one step weiter and say like this. If I say a dibur and someone acts upon that dibur, So now they took that dibur to another madrega. The dibur was a dibur. They acted upon that dibur. They're bringing that dibur to fruition. Their action is not only just an action of doing a malacha because I told them. The action is actualizing the dibur itself. I said, do this for me, and you actually did it. So the action has two things in it. The action is that you did the malacha for me, but the action is also it's actualizing the words themselves. The words themselves are now becoming so much greater. The words themselves went from the madrega of dibur. The words themselves now graduated to maisa. So there's an explosion of the words. The words themselves, the dibur themselves, this issue of the dabar davar, came to another step. The dvarim themselves became dvar manigmarim. So when I send a guy and I say to a guy, please do a malacha for me on Shabbos, the Bach understands there's no isser of shlichus mitzad the actual maisa hamalacha. Because in the actual maisa malacha, which the maisa malacha, turning on the light, the issue is the fact that when you turn on the light, you're not resting, then it can't be a shliach for me. But it could be a shliach for me that when he does that action, he's actualizing my words, bringing my words from dabar davar to super dabar davar. He's doing an action upon my words. He's bringing my words to fruition. So in the shlichus of Amir La'akam is a way to actualize the isser of dabar davar. And seif davar, the isser, the nekudas isser, is not the action of the malacha that I have. It's the fact that I have another step in dabar davar. And if that's true, so then if it's done in a way that dabar davar is mutter, it's mutter. So if I told the guy birmiza, if I hinted to him, so those words were never as words. They're always here. They're always here a form. So you can never have the issue, even though the shlichus, but the shlichus isn't the malacha, it's the dabar davar aspect. So in birmiza, it's going to be mutter. Yeah. What? Any Amir Erev Shabbos? No. I do an Amir Erev Shabbos, and it's greater than Amir on Shabbos. I told him to do it. It's my shliach. On Shabbos, he brought those farms and I'm like, the version of that was not